Have you ever seen someone ruin their life in just a few seconds? How did they do it? One of my high school classmates, a kicker on the football team, was at a party at a friend's house on the very last day of school in his senior year. The house was on a lake, and he decided to run off the end of the pier and jump headfirst into the lake. The water was a foot deep. He never walked again. Camping trip with friends. When we were around 17y/0. One kid hammered in his tent pegs, then just tossed the hammer at someone else's tent for no apparent reason. A girl was in the tent and caught full power of the hammer toss to her mouth. Shattered several teeth in her mouth, which she then choked on. She died choking on her own shattered teeth while alone and bleeding out of her face in a tent, with no idea of what caused her injury. Campsite in the middle of nowhere. It took over an hour for help to come. Kid got arrested and got suspended sentence for involuntary manslaughter. Waiting outside a club one rainy night. Some young lady decided to take one of the cop cars out front for a spin. After getting tossed out, she ended up crashing into one of those concrete barricade things blocking the side door. A family friend who was the coolest, nicest MF you'd ever meet. Had his shit together, and life just seemed good for him. One night partying a rando offered him some heroin. Fast forward 10 years later, and his wife has divorced him, took his kids. He lost everything he possibly owned. Sold all shit he had left to buy more heroin. Now is a bitter shell of his old self living on the street. He's probably dead by now. TL, doctor, don't try heroin. I knew a guy. He and his friends were into that trend of going to really high places and taking pictures of them hanging from them. The guy I knew got to the top of one of those massive crane things, and while taking the picture he fell. He died upon impact with the ground, and now, whenever I see pictures like that on social media, I want to cry and beg these people to stop before they lose their lives. Showing off for attention. We were a group of U.S. Marines traveling from Lax to Camp Pendleton in a school type bus. A woman pulled up next to us in a Jeep CJ5 on the I-5, unhooked her seatbelt, and began flashing skin at us. Of course, we cheered her on. After 2 minutes, she got bored and drove off. 10 minutes later, we encountered a traffic jam. As we passed the blocked area, we saw the Jeep on its side, and the woman laying nearby with most of her brains about 5 feet away. Unmuted Zoom call. Trash talking a manager. Ours posted a thank you X for your years of service ML pretty much the next day. This dude from my hometown was just drinking at a party leaning on the outside balcony of a 3rd floor apartment, pre-covered of course. Next thing you know, his hand slips and he falls down. Dead on the spot. Guy wasn't even 25. Cool dude too. Just a sad thing. Friend of mine had an old restored Jeep from like the 70s. Antique plates and everything. Ended up driving on the freeway really fast. Jeep went crazy and flipped. Broke his arm. Now has neurological problems and had to leave his 6-figure job to living at home with his parents. He was engaged, and that ended as well after his accident. My mom's best friend dove headfirst into the shallow end of a pool while drunk at one of my birthday parties. She broke her neck and became paralyzed from the neck down. She died a couple years later. A cousin, 40-ish, of mine seemed to have a great life, 2 kids and loving wife. One night out of nowhere he killed her and then killed himself. Neighbor heard gunshots and called for help. Both were instantly dead. Later revealed the wife was preparing to bring up divorce. He found out and wanted them to die while they were still together. Everyone connected was greatly shocked, to say the least. Most shocking, funerals and burials were together. So I guess he got exactly what he wanted. Dealing weed to a random person while at work. It was so obvious and right in front of my boss, and he was fired on the spot. His life isn't ruined, but it took him a long time to find a job again. I also was supposed to have a boss who was terminated for doing coke in his office. He was the president of a hospital, and he just threw it all away for coke. I was so bummed, because we really clicked and it completely messed up my fellowship at the hospital. Last I heard, he got a job in early 2020, over 2 years after it happened, as a director of a hospital department 3 states away. So while it's a good job, the pay reduction must have been massive. Bartending in Atlanta, had a group come in that was in town from Minneapolis for a work conference. We got them around, then realized how hammered most of them were and cut off the group. The head honcho was everybody's boss. I believe he owned the company. He was the only one in his right mind because he was leading the conference the next day. Cool guy actually. Anyway, they decided to get a ride to a strip club to keep the party going, and I got them some chips and Quizo to munch on in lieu of drinks. Quizo comes out. The drunkest guy thought it was soup and wanted to test this hypothesis by putting the damn skillet to his lips and burning the shit out of his mouth. It was ugly. Head honcho jokingly said, "I never should have hired your dumbass," and drunk guy immediately punches him in the teeth, harder than you'd expect a dude who can barely stand to be able to hit. Head honcho goes to the bathroom with a bloody mouth and a tooth in his hand, and the rest of the group got buddy out there. So in a matter of seconds this guy turned a fun night into second-degree burns and a trip to unemployment. I would imagine he was hard pressed to find another job in that field. I miss bartending lol. My ex-girlfriend used to dream of being a flight attendant. Years later, long after we'd parted ways, she finally saw that dream come true and got an assignment based out of another city. I hit her up to congratulate her and give her some advice for moving to that city where I'd spent a fair amount of time including a specific warning to stay out of a certain bar. After a couple months of training, she was a week into the job when she decided to hop on the mechanical bull at the very bar I'd advised her to avoid. Well, she made it about 1/2 of a second before she got tossed off and her neck hit a table, leaving her a quadriplegic. She did eventually regain limited use of her legs and fairly good use of her arms, but she will never work again and lives in her aging parents' spare bedroom. It's really sad, but she had a pretty long history of impulsively making poor choices, which probably included dating me, lol. I had an online friend from Sweden. He was a decent dude, weird, but I vibed with him very well. One day though he just went all ghost and no contact for a few weeks I think, before he came back and told me that he had run over someone and was going to jail. No idea if it was even legit, if he was telling the truth, but honestly he seemed pretty troubled by it. Since then I have never heard from him again, and his account is offline. Only thing I could really think of. A part of me will always question the legitimacy of it, but a piece of me also really thinks it would be a pretty trash thing to lie about, with no reason to lie anyways. I don't remember if he gave more details and if the person was okay, but I don't know. I don't think I even knew his real name. Saw a dude lose his slip for mooring his boats due to lack of payment. Decided to anchor off the shore, against all advice. Soft seafloor, high winds, break wall, etc. Apparently he went to the store and came back to his wooden boat, also his housing, in a million pieces. The guy was an idiot, and I often wonder if it was some Hail Mary attempt at getting his ex back in some fucked up way. Our neighbor went around telling us COVID was fake and he would prove it. After all, he was a CrossFit trainer and he should survive, right? He did, but now he is unemployed and with no insurance, cause his wife's insurance threatened to skyrocket her premiums, if not flat out drop them, if she put her husband on. He went from teaching multiple fitness classes a day to using a mobility scooter to make it down the street to the mailbox. He went from talking about how CrossFit was the key to happiness to speaking like Stevie from Malcolm in the Middle. He went from protein shakes and homemade vegetable smoothies to taking more pills than people twice his age and supplemental oxygen. And the subsequent infection hit his family. Now his wife may be talking about divorcing him. He is turning 40 next year. Don't let anyone tell you COVID is a bad cold. Never personally seen it, but about 10 years ago I've met someone who's paralyzed from the neck down. He was around his 20s, maybe early 30s, when we first met, and he shared the story of how he got paralyzed. Apparently, he was at a party at his friend's house and his friend had a trampoline at his backyard. They were all jumping on it when all of a sudden he landed wrong and got sent to the hospital after. His injury had actually caused his paralysis. In middle school at a school fundraiser, one of the 8th graders did a bet saying he would jump off the McDonald's second floor and into a blow-up pool full of water. He did a run up and jumped, but missed with half of his body in the pool and the other half on the pavement. But what's worse is that his body slides on the pavement. He didn't get up, and when someone pulled his body on his back, his right side had a lot of burns and flesh hanging over it, and his face had his cheek disoriented to the point I could see a couple teeth. In the hospital they said he had 3 broken bones and his skin would never look the same and his bone in his right leg wouldn't heal right. They barely fixed his cheek, so now he wears a mask, a hat, and he has crutches, plus he barely talks now.